I'm a big fan of the cider produced by Sheppies, particularly their single apple varieties. This Kingston Black has to be one of my personal favourites. And whilst drinking it recently, I was reflecting on the flavour. There was something almost chewable in the flavour, a slightly smoky note to it. Even though they've probably not smoked anything, it's just the flavours that are coming through with this very good cider. So I thought I would try and emulate that. More of a bastardisation. Is going to be nowhere near as good as this, made from pressed apples. But I thought I'd bring some of the elements of that to a cheaty cider brew, which I've made, where I've essentially used a cheap apple juice, one from concentrate, and added yeast to it, and essentially just fermented it like that. I've heard a lot of people do that, but add some tannin, which the juice will be missing, in the form of a strong tea. Now I thought I would bring that in with the elements of flavour that I've tasted in the Kingston Black, which reminded me of lapsang souchong tea, a smoked tea. So I made up a tea with a lapsang souchong tea bag in some of the apple juice, and then added the rest of the apple juice. Added a yeast. It was a blanche yeast that would hopefully give it an extra sort of clovey flavour, and left it to ferment, and then bottled. And this one has been in the fridge. I bottle conditioned it at room temperature for a week, and it's been in the fridge for about a week again. So now is the moment of truth. See if it's got any fizz at all. Well, it's certainly got the smoky flavour in there. It's certainly interesting. It's certainly not going to be making Sheppies particularly worried. It's nowhere near the quality, as you'd expect. Made like this, it's lacking some of the acidity that I would have liked, even though it's obviously got some of the tannin from the tea, and certainly a lot of the smoky flavour. But as an experiment for just a very simple cider made with apple juice, it's transformed it into something a lot more interesting. This does need a lot longer in the bottle to condition, because I think some of the fizz will bring a little bit of acidity, because as I've probably harped on about before in other brewing videos, carbon dioxide dissolved in an aqueous solution forms carbonic acid, so that might give a little bit of acidity to it. Now, I did brew this using a blanche yeast, one which I think is quite acceptable to have in the finished drink, and I thought it was quite an easy thing to well, I think a nice thing to do to make a bottle conditioned beer much easier to pour, because it doesn't matter if you're sloppy with it if the yeast goes in. So I tried to pour this carefully without any yeast in, but I'm now going to agitate the bottle to stir up that yeasty sediment, and then I'm going to add that to this and see how it affects the flavour. And as you can see, that's made it a much more murky cider. It's affected the flavour a little bit, but either way, poured carefully or otherwise, it's quite an acceptable cheap cider. Cheers. I recently discovered in the cupboard under the stairs a few brown bottles that I'd filled with an experimental cider that I'd brewed 2 years ago. I last tasted it not long after it was first made, so 2 years on maturing in the bottle, I think it's high time I give it a second taste. Well, a rather disappointing low amount of fizz there, so the extra time in the bottle possibly hasn't made a huge amount of difference. Certainly not to the condition of it anyway, the fizziness of it. But let's see the difference it's made to the taste. I mean, from here, not close up, I can smell the cider. It has improved, and it's far, far better tasting, better balanced. It's just a pity that it's not fizzier. I think 2 years on in the bottle was long enough for it to have built up condition. I can only assume that I didn't add enough sugar to the bottle before leaving it to condition. But overall the flavour is more rounded and balanced, and the smokiness from the lapsang souchong has certainly come through. I think next time it could certainly do with a great deal more of the lapsang souchong. It hasn't been overpowering at all. I think for this, from what I can remember, I probably only used 1 or 2 tea bags for a 1 gallon demijohn, and probably didn't leave it in that long at all. So I think next time what I'll probably do is use 3 lapsang souchong tea bags, leave it to stew to get enough tannin out of there, at least 5 minutes in some boiling water. In this I didn't want to make it too weak, so I did actually use hot apple juice. But if I make just 1 standard mug's worth of very strong tea and add it to the apple juice on its own, from the natural sugars in there, should really be sufficient to give a decent strength of cider. But plenty of people do add more sugar, and that itself, the extra alcohol, will give a greater mouthfeel. But I'm quite pleased with this. It's certainly the appley ciderness has come through nicely. And you can feel here it has got a nice amount of acidity. It just needs to be fizzier for my personal taste. Obviously there are still non-fizzy ciders out there. All in all, not bad at all. Cheers.